Thanks everyone for making it today, and I'm just going to say that, or at least introduce Prof, who's one of the trustees of the Umlambo Foundation, and also, is it the chair or the head of the Wits School of Governance?
No.
No, I'm trying to be...
No. Somebody oversold me to you.
Is it?
Yeah. I'll explain.
I blame Rebs. Let's just say he's a hotshot.
I'll explain later.
Okay, fantastic. So, thank you all for making it today. I know it's World Education Day. It's the 24th of January. And myself and Rebs were thinking of putting something together to discuss the state of education. The last time that we did this was during the pandemic. And we did it all online. It was looking more at how we can leverage technology to be able to enhance education in South Africa. And now, considering 2 years later, or 3 years later actually, bordering on around about that time, we thought that it was necessary to reflect and look back over that period and to understand how we can look at transforming education in a positive manner in the country. And so we brought all of these phenomenal individuals here today. Some of you know each other already, to try and see what we can do to address the challenges that we face in education. And we have asked Prof. Anthony van Nieuwkerk to come in and facilitate this session for us. There's sort of 3 sections that we're looking at. And at each section we've asked one of the participants here just to briefly kind of talk on the area. And then we want all of you to be involved in discussing and unpacking the topics that we hope to cover today. And after that, we will be developing a report that we can then distribute to all of you, as well as try and use to guide how we take what comes out of this session further. So I would like to hand over to Prof. Anthony now and let him take the session forward. Thank you everyone for making it today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Robin. So maybe a word of thanks to Letsima, in whose boardroom we sit today. Thank you kindly, and we trust the aircon will come on stream very soon. And thanks for all the nice goodies. And thanks to Umlambo Foundation. The patron might join us a little bit later. Yeah, so just keep a seat for her. I'm a trustee of the foundation. I was at Wits with Anne, whom I'll introduce in a minute, but I moved on to UNISA. UNISA's creating a new school, the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs. And I'm trying to do the international part of the school. And we're starting to enroll students from this year. So it's exciting times, but I know we're going to talk about all aspects of education, but as an academic at a university, higher education is also in turmoil, especially when it comes to leadership challenges. I haven't listened to the news this morning, so I don't know if UCT is on strike as of today, but the tensions are palpable, they're under the surface, and it's more than just salaries. It also involves content issues and identity and purpose. So we're not going to talk about that necessarily. We're going to do a very broad sweep of where we are with education, and there are 2 reasons why we're meeting today. Of course, it's a UN-declared International Day of Education, and they link, or it links UNESCO in particular, this celebration to the Sustainable Development Goal number 4. Number 4, which has 10 thematic areas, which I'm going to use towards the end to see if it can maybe anchor our conversation, our discussion. And the other reason is, who has not listened with some emotion to the announcement of the matric results? And you listen to the minister, and then you listen to the DG, and then you listen to Mary Metcalf. She was on every TV station and radio station. And you listen to experts across the board, and you ask yourself, what? Even Musi Maimane is an expert, talking about 30 and 40%. And I think that's another reason. I don't mind that sort of rather controversial conversation about the meaning of the pass rate, because it brings the focus back to the state of education. And if this can be, one of my conclusions, having read up and prepared for this morning, is if we can make this an annual reflection and bring out a report and tell Umlambo and maybe policymakers elsewhere what it is that we think are of priority, then we will be valuable. In fact, if we agree to that, I'm now giving you my conclusion. Imagine we do this again next year with aircon and so on, and we come to this table and we have a report ready, a draft. We put it on the table and then we discuss it. So let's see how the conversation goes this morning. Let's hear to our inputs, 3 inputs, and they will generate discussion. And towards the end, some of us can bring this together and see if we can convince Dr. Phumzile Mlambo that she needs to read the report and engage with it and talk to the people that she's influential with. And you know who they are. It's from days at the UN to a time in the ruling party and then engaging with civil society. I can't think of a better supporter of the initiative that we're undertaking today. Okay, so let me re-emphasize that we want to take this just a little bit beyond a talk shop. In fact, we want to do 2 things strategically. Rebuile from Umlambo and Robin formulated this. I want to emphasize this. How can we reimagine the education system and schools in South Africa and come up with an agenda for action? This is not just soft talk. It's addressing a crisis. How can we reimagine the education system and schools in South Africa and come up with an agenda for action? So we want to be action-oriented. And I reflected on this part of the sentence. How can we create a new vision for schools in South Africa? What do you mean new vision? A vision or a new vision? You mean there is a vision? Do we have to reflect on the vision and maybe deconstruct it and maybe reconstruct it? Okay. And how can a school ideally look like? What does the ideal school look like? It's not the school here in Rosebank down the road. It's the school in Vembe district where the challenges lie. Okay, so that's more or less the point of departure. So allow me to tell you who the 3 input speakers will be. They're not going to make big presentations, are you? No. Give us your initial thoughts, and then we're going to have a roundtable discussion. Actually, before I do that, let's whip around the table and just tell us who you are and where you come from. So my name is Antoni van Nieuwkerk from UNISA and from Umlambo.
My name is Bongane Sibanyoni. I'm from Country Duty Foundation. I'm an education philanthropist. I'm a banker by profession for one of the banks. That's what I do as a side hustle. My real work is education, actually. That's what I'm passionate about.
Great. Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Dumisole. I am also a founder of Country Duty with Bongani, and I ensure that, or at least try and keep people fit through running with Dumisole on social media. And I'm an attorney for my scenes, and I'm glad to be here.
Morning everyone, my name is Nthanisini and I am with T South Africa. We are an organization that is looking at addressing disparities in schools, I guess like everyone here. But my background is focusing on communication and capturing the stories, to tell the stories that are going on in schools with the ambassadors that are present.
Thank you.
Roger Dickinson, I'm from a Better Africa Foundation. I'm a social entrepreneur, and I think my biggest goal in life is to disrupt education across the world. So we're busy doing that in 20 countries, and hopefully this will be part of growing that.
Wow.
Good morning, my name is Swami Bongunkalele. I run a small foundation, just started to do it, hardly 2 years old, BWEF. But I've spent a great time of my time in children's issues, so education just happened to be children.
Yeah.
So it's not higher education, it's small ones. I was at the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund for 21 years.
Oh.
So and I have a sense of what's going on with children, and with how education is affecting children. And I'm really here
You undersell yourself.
Is that smile of his? Yeah, exactly. Thanks. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jillian Ndlovu, and I'm with the Umlambo Foundation.
You're right.
Sorry?
We couldn't hear.
Oh, my name, Jillian Ndlovu, and I'm with the Umlambo Foundation.
Ah, thanks.
I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Umlambo, and I'm one of the couples that put this together.
Hi everyone, Robin Beakers, and I run the Letsemba Foundation. And I'm so glad that all of you are here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Annie Ndlovu. I'm from Instill Education and Private Higher Ed. Also, like yourself, disrupting education in Africa, not just South Africa. In EduTech mainly, we're working with EduTech, but also my keen interest for the past 6 years has been rural education as well.
Morning everyone, my name is Herman Sekwele. I am from University of Johannesburg, Faculty of Engineering, Technolab. We're doing outreach programs for teacher development in coding and robotics in schools.
Good morning, everyone. It's actually such a pleasure to be amongst all of you. I'm from school. I'm presently an acting principal at Balala Primary School in Centurion and passionate about education.
How was the traffic this morning?
Don't even ask.
Welcome.
It's crazy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jackie Batchelor from University of Johannesburg. I work in the Faculty of Education. I'm the acting Deputy Dean for Teaching and Learning, but I specialise in digital learning.
Yeah, right. Thanks. Welcome.
Morning, everyone. I'm Nick Taylor. I was a maths and science teacher for 10 years. And for 4 years, I was working with maths teachers in Soweto as a subject advisor. And ever since then, I've been with Jet Education Services, a non-profit organisation, doing development work, working with a number of you. And but I'm on the research side these days, looking in particular at teachers and teacher education and how we can improve that. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kensani Baloyi. I'm a social worker by profession. I'm with Nick at Jet Education Services. I'm the ECD research officer there, focusing on implementation and curriculum improvement for ECD practitioners located in the Anglo-American schools. And I'm also a Comrades Marathon finisher. Thank you.
That's amazing.
Shall we leave?
Hi everyone, my name's Anne McLennan and I'm unattached, a person without any formal portfolio. I did spend 25 years at the Wits School of Governance, and then I spent sort of 2.5 years working for PILO on the ground trying to do school change. And now I'm, I suppose, sort of I was retrenched during COVID, and now I'm sort of semi-retired. But my big issue is actually, why is the education system so hard to change? And I more and more think that the way to change it requires quite radical action. So that's what I'm really interested in.
Okay, we'll hear more a little bit later.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you just arrived.
I've just arrived.
We're just doing introductions.
Oh, thanks. I came at the right time. I'm Richard Masemola. I'm one of the co-founders of Teach South Africa. We do work in the development space. We recruit graduates from universities and place them into schools to teach maths and science, English, IT, in the STEM subjects. I've worked closely with Jet over years, and we're still around after COVID. It has wreaked havoc in our organizations, but we're not going away. We're here. I'm also a school principal in Soweto. I've joined them during the COVID time. So our NGOs were getting a whole lot of flashing, funding drying up in that space. So I had to move so that my salary in the NGO get directed to the young people and I can pick it somewhere. So yes, that's where my day-to-day is now. The teach is going on.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. My name is Antoine. I'm the facilitator for the conversation. And I was just saying, I don't know how many more people will arrive.
About 2 or 3 potentially, so we're just putting it aside.
Oh, okay. All right.
And we'll stop now.
Okay. So we'll forge ahead. My impression is, as we introduced ourselves around the table, we can't run away from this initiative now because everyone here is an expert in one or other form, and you will be co-authors of this report. Because I was also saying that if this sparks action, we have to come back in a year's time and put a report on the table to say, what is this radical action that we're proposing, and how feasible and sustainable is it? And who can we pull in as partners? Okay, good. So I think we can start. Let me tell you what the program initially looked like before the aircon failed. We want to ask Nick to start off by talking about the state of education in South Africa, the challenge we face with curriculum and pre-service training. Was that cleared with you before? Yeah, okay. The challenges we face with curriculum and pre-service training. And that's going to be Nick, and he's already introduced himself, but I read up on him, and I looked at some videos. 2 years ago, he quoted the OECD with this paragraph. Technology can amplify great teaching, but great technology cannot replace poor teaching. And then the rest that follows. I thought that was pretty profound. And this is very relevant to Umlambo Foundation, who's investing resources in exactly, and many of you as well. So Nick is going to start off, and then we'll have a 15-minute or so round table to hear him out, to ask him questions, to reflect on our own experiences and so on. But you must time yourself, because Anne will then follow after Nick, and she tells me now when she arrived that she knows exactly what she's going to talk about. She's been briefed. Education.
I found out yesterday afternoon.
Education in the 21st century, opportunities and outlook. It sounds such a bland title for a report, opportunities and outlook. But Anne, you've been around for a long time. You know exactly what it is you want to say. And we're going to do the same. Once she's given a sort of a short input, we will reflect and discuss with her. And then thirdly, the same thing we will do with Tumi, Sol, or is it Sole? Sole. I looked at a video where you and Sizwe Mpofu, Welsh, spoke. He calls you the mayor of Twitter. Is that still true?
No, that has changed.
That has changed.
You're now the president.
Are you moved up?
Through the ranks, yes.
Through the ranks. No longer the mayor.
No longer the mayor.
Yeah. Oh, so you're an influential influencer.
I'm being told, yes.
Yes. We are very happy. We are very happy to have you here. You're going to tell us what's happening on the ground and what people are saying to you. And fantastic. And we'll do the same thing. You give us a short input. It's rather informal. It's not an academic conference. And then we'll reflect with you. And I think, Robin, if you can help with the timekeeping, because you also have, all of us have things to do once we leave this beautiful building and beautiful set of offices. Is this available for next year? Okay, so who's recording the session? Fantastic. Okay, so timekeeping, we want to leave around 12:30. Is there a tea break in between, Robin? It is now 9:30.
When we want to take one?
Okay.
Because there's also some snacks, and then we can...
Okay, we'll take a break halfway through.
Perfect.
All right, okay, good. Are you happy with the agenda? You know what's coming? Okay. Nick, all eyes on you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. Our chairman mentioned that, everyone's an expert on schooling. We've all been to school for 12 years. We all know it backwards. We know exactly what's needed. Wrong. There are so many myths about schooling. that are dangerous, that everyone sounds off about in the press all the time. Daily we read about, oh, our kids can't do anything, we've got to change the curriculum. Oh, our teachers don't know how to teach, we've got to bring in technology. All of these things are important, and technology is incredibly important. Kids have to know about it, they have to know how to use it. But that OECD report is absolutely spot on. How many schools have you been into, and somewhere in some dusty back corner you find a computer lab graveyard? Occasionally the teachers use it to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken in, but none of those computers probably ever work properly. If a teacher can't use a textbook properly, there's no way she's going to use a computer. Besides, the thing goes down all the time. If there's not a techie on duty all the time, that thing within 5 minutes is going to fall into disrepair. But that's not one of the myths I want to talk about. I want to talk about myths around the curriculum and about pre-service teacher education. So now, here we are, our kids can't read. We've got to change the curriculum. Our kids are not learning what the things we need to teach them. Fourth industrial revolution, 21st century skills, wada, but they can't read. What are they going to do with 21st century skills? The beginning point is reading. But now everyone wants to change the curriculum. Let me make a distinction. You've got the intended curriculum, which is the document, the CAPS document now, that is given to teachers. This is what you've got to teach. You've got the attained curriculum, which is what learners know and are able to do after 12 years of schooling. But in the middle is the implemented curriculum. It's the bridge between those two. So now, if the kids are not getting the attained curriculum, the knee-jerk is to say, oh, we've got to change the intended curriculum. Wrong. The intended curriculum, yes, it can do with a bit of tweaking, is absolutely fine. This is the problem here. Our teachers don't know how to teach reading. That's the big issue. Stop all this talk about, oh, we've got to change the curriculum. Oh, we've got to disrupt schooling to do this and that and that. We've got to get the teachers to be able to teach reading and maths. Without those, we're never going to get anywhere. Yet we have all these fancy ideas. Oh, here comes a new third stream model for schooling. But they can't read, Mr. DG. They can't add and subtract properly, let alone multiply and divide. The problem actually is the teachers. Now, I sound like I'm bashing teachers. It's not their fault. They've been badly educated. The problem is with the university education faculties. Okay, so here comes another myth now. Oh, we must go back to the colleges. The colleges did everything right. Yeah, that was the halcyon days where our learners were just learning everything. Wrong. The colleges are actually worse than the universities. Yes, there were 2 or 3 really good colleges, but there were 110 colleges, and most of them were worse than useless. They were worse than high schools. And in fact, I've got facts and figures that I can demonstrate that with. You know, there's this thing called SACMEC, the Southern and Eastern African Consortium for Monitoring Education Quality. 15 Southern and Eastern African countries participate. South Africa comes about in the middle somewhere, even though we spend 20, 30 times more per child than Uganda does, but we scored about the same as Uganda. Grade 6 maths and language tests. They do it periodically every 4 or 5 years. The interesting thing about SACMEC is they test the teachers too. Grade 6 maths and language teachers. Now, the results of those are really quite shocking. They show you that the average South African teacher can't get 50% on a grade 6 maths test. They don't know the curriculum they're supposed to be teaching. They actually can't multiply and divide very well themselves. But the really interesting thing about those tests is if you break down the results by teacher age, so they break it down by every 10 years. Teachers who are 20 to 30 score this, teachers who are 30 to 40 score that, and so on. The older the teachers, the worse these results. So the youngest teachers, the ones who've been educated in the universities, are scoring around 53% on the maths test. The teachers, all the other teachers who are educated under the colleges, they go to 40, 30, 20. So, you know, there's your myth about the colleges having done things properly. Teachers are definitely being educated better today than they were under the colleges, on average again, all right? But that doesn't mean they're being educated nearly well enough. We've been doing these tests on B.Ed students. First year, kids come in from school, eager beavers, they want to be teachers. Fourth year, 4 years later, they've now had 4 years of university education. So you give them a maths test in their first year, a primary school maths test. And by the way, the policy says all teachers in the primary school, foundation and intermediate phase must be able to teach a home language, they must be able to teach a first additional language, and they must be able to teach maths. It's compulsory. So we give them a maths test. First year B.Ed students, they score about 49% on average on a primary school maths test. Fourth year, they've improved. They now score 50%. So they've had 4 years of university education where they're learning to be maths teachers, and they have learned not one damn thing about the primary school maths curriculum. That's university education faculties for you. So that's, colleagues, that's where our problem lies. If we want one priority for education, that is it. We must educate our primary school teachers so that they can teach reading and they can teach mathematics. That's just two things our education system needs. You know, yeah, there's who about the matric exam. I actually get sick when I see these people celebrating. The Free State is the best, yay! The Free State is the best because they cull their students the most. The matric pass rate is a really poor indicator of the quality of schooling. Because, why? Well, grade 11, no, you're not going into matric because you're not going to pass. You're going to pull our pass rate down. So you're going to stay in grade 11 or leave the school or write privately. Yeah, that's how the Free State gets to be the best. And Gauteng, you know, I get absolutely sick when Panyaza Lusufi crows about Gauteng has regained the crown. We are now the kings of the matric results. Colleagues, South African top schools in the SACMIC tests, I'm talking about our leafy suburban schools, Model Cs, they do worse on the SACMIC tests than the middle of the Kenyan distribution. What is going on? You know what's going on? We're complacent. Yay, we've regained the crown. This pathetic thing about the best matric pass rate is what leads us into this sense of complacency. We are so good, we don't have to do anything. Kenyan township schools are beating our Model C schools. And the reason for me is twofold. The teachers are better educated. On those SACMIC teacher tests, Kenyan teachers outperform South Africans by a long way. Secondly, they've got more accountability in their system. Of course, this is the other problem. And you just want to read volume 4 of the Zondo report, part 2, read about the nepotism, corruption, wealth generating factory that the government has become, to understand why we're not managing our schools properly. Because we've got mukhus in charge of everything. Politicians who don't know anything. All they know is about swaying a crowd in a public gathering. They know absolutely nothing about education. They're not interested in efficient management. So those are our two big problems, guys, in my view. It's the civil service, the political economy of the civil service is rotten, and we're not educating our teachers nearly well enough. Thank you.
Right. Before we open up, say one more word about how we turn this problem around. Not the political economy one.
Yeah.
That's a political issue we can discuss at length.
Yeah.
It's a big one, and maybe we need a session for that. But if a teacher is not properly trained and can't deliver, how do we improve on that? What is our recommendation here?
Our recommendation is, well, what I've been doing for the last 12 years, guys, is working with education faculties on this problem. Because I realized, I read Di Parker's thesis in 2010, and I was absolutely astonished at how poorly our education faculties are working with our teachers. So since 2010, I've been working on this issue, working with education faculties. So first we did a research project that looked at what they're doing, and we revealed the results to them. And people started saying, good grief. Then since 2016, we had a project funded by DHET. By the way, the government is fully behind this. Government understands this. I have to say, it's, especially the Department of Higher Education and Training. They understand this problem with teachers, and they're doing their best to work on it through policy to support research and development activities. So DHET funded this project to develop standards for what should primary school teachers know and be able to do in the terms of literacy and maths. So we got the standards now. And it was that project that did those tests that I described to you, where we tested the B.Ed students, first year and fourth year. So all of that has now been contributing to awareness raising in the education sector, in the education faculties, about what we're not doing and what we should be doing. And people are now really working quite hard at developing new curricula. So there are maths curricula emerging. There's something like 12 universities now participating in a pilot on a new maths curriculum for B.Ed students. And personally at JET, we are managing a project that's developing a reading pedagogy course for delivery to B.Ed students, to teach them how to teach reading in isiXhosa and Sesotho. The African languages are the huge issue. I mean, Model C schools are, they're not doing very well, but they're sort of okay. But our African language kids, there are not even sufficient reading books for them. So we're developing this course now in isiZulu and Sesotho for use in B.Ed programs to teach student teachers how to teach reading. And for me, that is the most important priority for the country, even more important than ESCOM.
Okay, let me, before I open up to the floor for your contribution, we've got two newcomers.
Morning everyone. So I'm Tembi from NK Make Them Up. I'm the training and engagement manager there.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, morning everyone. My name is Nompumelelo Nene. I'm an educator.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Right.
I think if we shift up, we can
bring them
fit
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a gap there as well.
So that's our first.
Okay. Okay, there we go.
Can you kindly change sparkling for still?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
The red one, yeah. The blue sparkling there.
Oh, you don't want to sparkling? I'm lucky.
Thank you. Sorry for the disruption.
No, it's fine. Okay, so let's hear you. I want to say that Mr. Photographer, that flashlight of yours is a bit detracting from the conversation. If you can reduce the number of pictures of Nick, it's like you've fallen in love with him. Yeah. I counted about 30 pictures of one man, and then Anne's gonna get more. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I can do without.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, thank you very much. Floor is open.
Okay, I'll kick it off.
Yes.
It's a young person here.
Good.
As I said, I'm working. I was at Wits previously, but now I'm working for Instill Education. It's the new kid in the block, and our focus is in teacher education, and literally coming in the space that Nick just described. Like, how do we prepare our teachers to be good literacy and numeracy teachers? And our institution, I mean, there's always theories around, but we want to flip it around and say there's no ways you can train teachers without emphasizing on the practicality of teaching. The moment we compromise on teaching being a practical subject or practical profession, let me put it that way, a practical profession, we lose the essence of what a teaching is. Likewise, the moment you stop seeing medicine as a practical profession, you lose the essence of what it is. So our strategy to, maybe I'll speak to Nick and others after this, is we're looking at simplifying how we teach literacy and reading by focusing on key skills that a teacher can go tomorrow and be able to implement. Instead of sitting there with all this theory that you have to wait for teaching practice for you to implement, and then you've forgotten because you're so stuck in the critical theorism, the all these ism, right? Is how do we take, as Nick has said, how do we look at, okay, this is literacy, how do I teach reading comprehension? Can we focus on 3 steps that teachers can follow for them to be effective reading comprehension teachers? By themselves being immense in the practice of being reading comprehension teachers. So do it yourself, as through the pre-service teaching, is model it to your student teachers and say to them, if you want to be a reading profession, we're going to demonstrate it right now. You're going to do it yourself. And then we're going to do micro practices where you are reinforcing these particular skills before you go into the classroom.
How do we reinforce that? What is your recommendation? Do you think we should have a second round of deans of faculties or heads of department at all these universities to reinforce the point? Or should the action be elsewhere?
I think one of the things lessons we've learned from COVID is that everyone was doing the same thing, but we were not talking to each other. We are working in isolation, and this is something I've experienced in rural schools. Ford Foundation will come, Umlambo will come, this one will come, and there's a whole lot, and they expect teachers to improve in their pedagogy, but we're all doing 20,000 interventions. And the teachers are just like, then which one are we supposed to do, right? But if we, as educationalists and professions and experts, we can just say, as Nick, I think they're heading in the right direction. For literacy, what is the big plan that can be rolled out everywhere? And bring the different innovations in that. I mean, we've gone the app direction, right? We've gone where teachers can do professional development for 20 minutes on their phones, even in rural Kenya, and we've tested it in Kenya and Ghana. And we said, if it can work, they can work anyway, because network there is not MTN in Vodacom, it is something totally different, right? And how do you get teachers to just say, I want to learn how to teach a skill, how do I do it by tomorrow? And just doing a 20 minutes module. That they can just say, these are the key things you need to emphasize when you're doing this particular skill. And then tomorrow, we give you a task. Then plan your lesson tomorrow where you can implement this particular skill. So, like, the issue with us is like, we all want to improve education, but we have such a big ego. We all want to be known. And no one wants to say, let's step back. It's not about us, it's about our children. The impact is on our learners. It's not actually the teachers are the big thing, but the impact at the end of the day is with the learners.
Okay, great. Are you a teacher now?
No longer a teacher, I was.
Okay.
I'm a dean of a campus. I'm the dean of a campus.
Right, and there are some teachers and principals here. We need to hear from them. There's a hand.
I'm not responding to the question. I wanted to field the question to Nick so that when he responds, also picks up on what I want to raise. Is that okay?
Of course.
Over the past 12 years, Teach South Africa has been recruiting university graduates in the math, science, English, IT space for the math classes, or the gateway subject, as they call it. These are novice graduates who don't have the teacher qualification. So we're playing in the space of initial teacher education. And for over time, there's been a lot of conversation around PGCE, UNISA not doing well in that space, and other universities emerging with their programs on the PGCE program. To date, I've heard, Nick, I'm not sure how true is that UNISA has finally closed down its PGCE. Northwest is picking that up, and other universities. So I'm coming back to the conversation you are raising on the myths and the challenges and around teacher education development and whether universities are good in doing this or are not good in doing that, whether we should go to colleges or not. But our experience in teachers has been having got these graduates with no teacher background, give them a crash course on some steroids and get them into classes. They've come out good. They've done well. They've been misplaced, of course. Our mandate is to put them in grade 8 and 9 to correct the maths gaps or the content gaps in the subjects that we are designed to look at. But you get schools patching their own problems, taking them into grade 12, novice as they are, make them to swim or fail, but they have succeeded in the long run. Now, the stats you are giving of how older teachers perform in mathematics tests and the younger teachers do starts to come to light for me with what we have just shared in so profound. That our young people grapple quicker with innovation and content mastery in this subject. I don't know whether as you get old you lose the content or what, but we have found the young teachers doing very well. Maybe Nick, you can expand on those two that I have raised, that what is it that we can deepen our work as teachers to continue to do the work or abandon it and leave it to university to produce teachers, or with those that are in the initial teacher education space, the LEAPs, you can call them, GTIs, and all the initial teacher organization in this space, to continue with the work that they are doing, because as boutique as it might appear with small numbers they are bringing into the system, we are retaining 60 to 70% of these graduates that we thought they will do a gap year and walk away to become engineers and everybody else elsewhere. They are remaining in the system. They are now becoming heads of departments in school. They are becoming deputy principals and they are leading principal. When the minister announces results, they are the ones who are picking distinctions with their learners and so on and so forth. And we are proven right in some way that we are ambitious to think that an unqualified teacher with no methodology can walk into a class and teach. Let me pause here.
You agree, and you are also agreeing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, you have to say something. Sir.
So Nick, thanks. You triggered me a couple of times, but I'm going to try and avoid the triggers. So there's a lot to talk about, but I think just two myths that I wanted to put back at you. I think the trigger came when in the last part of your conversation around the corrupt government, incompetent thing. That's a generalization, and that's incorrect. It's a very big myth, right?
Well, it's not a myth. I mean, it's uneven, I would say.
I would say I think the system blocks the people in the system who are actually there to do the work.
Yeah.
And I think all of us work with those people. Some of them are sitting in this room every single day. So I think we should avoid this kind of, because that's a general thing that's happening in the country now. This government's useless and the whole thing is going to hell. That is not true, right? There's a lot that's going right, and there's a lot of things that could go better if there was more support. So I just wanted to that was my biggest trigger. The second myth is that, and I probably I apologize to everyone. The myth that a teacher in a classroom is the right model for education, I think is the biggest myth that we've bought into for the last 250 years. And that most of us are not willing to say that's actually not. And especially for the 20 whatever century we are in now. Whatever century. And something you mentioned about, or I think it was Antoni mentioning, the leafy schools are doing better. They're not. They're not educating our kids any better. My kids are in those schools. Are not any better for the world that exists now, and our unemployment rate is the clear indicator of that. Not only in South Africa but globally. So I just wanted to put.
Not yet.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. I've always been concerned by the admission requirements for teacher qualification. Just recently, we're running a Saturday school program in Limpopo, and learners are mainly applying for teacher education because the APS scores are very low. So you compare it to engineering, for instance, they'll be looking, say, 35, 8, whatever score. And go education, they're looking for 21. What does it say about education? We're looking for poorly performing kids from schools to say these are the kids that we can train to be teachers. I mean, if you look at what Mr. Massimo was just saying right now, the students that they are placing in schools are mainly from engineering faculty or engineering graduate. And the admission score was very high. And that can tell you that, the good passes that they have in matric has a lot of impact in them being good teachers. I mean, the admission requirements for teaching. I mean, this year we've heard in the news that the most applied streams in all the universities were education. And what does it say? It's because the score, the APS score that is required is very low, and everyone jumps into that, and those are going to be our teachers, and that's my concern.
Okay.
Is it Jackie? Can I go?
You can go.
Okay. I want to base my concerns with regard to experience. I've been in the profession at 29 years, going into 30 years, and 25 years I've been a foundation phase specialist. And I want to just take a point from what Sir just mentioned, yes. And just say in terms of teacher qualification, we hear the saying that teaching is actually a calling and not a job. So you need people in front of our learners that are passionate about what they are doing. But you find that most of our teachers have sort of applied for other careers, and when they have failed in their application, teaching is the one they come to. So the passion and the drive and the commitment and the dedication is lacking. And I want to also say with reading, our teachers from observation, not specifically to my school, generally, because I have moved schools, do not know how to teach reading. I want to look at the orthodox old school of teaching reading versus technology. You go back, and as I said, I've been long there teaching reading with the phonics program, with sight recognition words, stringing letters together to blend to make a sound and then formulate a word. Those are basic knowledge of teaching reading. And when children learn how to read words, they start building sentences and ends paragraphs. And then with that ties in comprehension, ma'am, as you had mentioned. Why not tie that with technology? We have children that are in front of us. We're still teaching in a conservative way, the old school of teaching. By using technology in the class, nothing stops us by teaching the very same concept through technology. The children will be even excited to learn because they are familiar, because our kids are with cell phones and gadgets. They're not on the chalkboard and, just being a visual person. And what I also want to say, in the learners in our class, in terms of teaching, training and development, it's not catering for the uniqueness of every child in the classroom. We have our visual learners, we have our auditory learners, but we teach one cap fits all. And differentiation teaching is neglected, all right? And then I just want to stay on matric. Wow, Nick. Yes, we're all excited about matric results. For me, I have a matriculant this year, and I want to believe I'm in matric this year. A lot, Lamaki. And let me tell you, did you know what I told my son? I just want you to pass matric. It's a ticket for your career, because he's not academically inclined. It's like telling a fish to climb a tree and feeling stupid all its life. So he is a musician, an artist. He's in the creative part. And yet, if he doesn't get 7 distinctions, families are going to ask, how many distinctions did your son get? I said, don't even expect that. I just want him to pass comfortably, and I want him to follow his heart and passion. And if he wants to do music, I always believe when you follow your dreams and you do what you're passionate about, money will automatically come. So that's my take on my observation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to also just link up with the triggers. Listening to Nick and also maybe
Sorry.
No, maybe coming from a also a university that is responsible for educating pre-service teachers, I want to just respond to a few of the comments that were raised. Nick started off by pointing out the different types of curriculums, and I want to say one of the areas that he neglected was the hidden curriculum. The curriculum of the values, the norms, the attitudes of the teachers and what is enacted in the classroom. And I think we mustn't undervalue that hidden curriculum. Because it's not just about what is being taught and how it's being taught. It's about so much more other things. So that's one of the areas that we need to focus on. The other thing is this identity of a pre-service teacher, that magically this individual that is sourced from a deficit education system, that have got 12 years of, I almost want to say it, neglect, to come into a university space, and then throughout the 4 years are placed intermittently back in the school where all the new learnings that they are accepting, then during their work integrated learning, they spend weeks and weeks back into the same type of schools where they are sourced from, where there is an internal conflict that is happening, and this dialogue between what are they learning, but what are they seeing in the classroom. They are dropped back as individuals within a schooling environment. They one teacher that I've got new ideas, new training, new techniques. They go back into a school, there are 40 other teachers that are resistant to change, and that is what they are confronted with. So whatever they're learning is diluted by them being placed into school where they report to an HOD that is not accepting of their new techniques. So it's a difficult scenario. Universities are not this magical spaces where we bring individuals in and magically they are these change agents. And they are change agents, but they meet with so much resistance, and because of that, they fall into also some form of despair. So I want to also link up with Nick and also want to say that our university is part and parcel of that PrimTED program with the 12 universities really making an effort to understand this mathematics problem that we have within schools and the reading problem. And I think one of the only things that we could do not one of the only, but one of the things that we could do as a university is to learn from the research and then to act on it, and then to implement those learnings by changing our curriculum, and then to in some way move the needle. We recognize we're not going to move it to 90, but we are moving the needle slowly in terms of their content knowledge, and that is what we can celebrate. So those are just a few points that I want to mention. And the other panacea, shortly, because I work in digital learning, I study it, I test various applications within the schooling environment to see how it is adopted, what kind of change it can bring, and we shouldn't put all our hopes on that type of solution. I just wanted to wave that red flag.
That's a trigger. We will have to come back
Yeah.
to that.
It's a big red flag.
Yes,
I want to
yes.
just
Excellent. Thank you very much. You are ready. Maybe the last comment before we consolidate, ask Nick to respond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like just listening to everyone, I wish I wasn't lost so that I heard like a lot of what Nick had to say. So I have a lot of friends who went through the PGCE route. They had studied for other things, but now they're educators, and they are the ones that were also like gushing about all the distinctions their students got. And they weren't formally trained to be teachers. They just got that year where they're like, these are the methods that teachers use that, but rely a lot more on what your undergrad was, and it was just very interesting to hear that actually this is something that's happening outside of just the little bubble that I'm exposed to. So I think my thing is I've attended like a few of these engagements where we're surrounded by educators or people in the education space, and a lot of the times what the other initiatives around education are doing to support what teachers do is always neglected or not given the spotlight. So what we do is that we work within the school space with like the educators to support the environment. Like I love when you said the hidden curriculum, because that's the space that we work in. And we've realized that if that space is not fully engaged, it doesn't matter how much the teacher's trained. They won't do much with this child who's feeling all these other things that they're feeling, or is feeling that my environment is not conducive for learning. So if when we are thinking about the recommendations, can we also think about that hidden curriculum? How do we support that? How do we boost that so that as educated and as trained as the teacher is met with the child who's ready to receive that?
Yeah, thank you for that input. Okay, so Nick, would you like to respond to some of, not all, some? We're building a little agenda here, but you can cover yourself.
You know, the Minister of Basic Education asked me in 2012 to set up this thing called NEDU, the National Education Evaluation and Development Unit. It's supposed to be a school inspectorate.
Yeah.
And I was there for 3 years, and it was a wonderful time actually, because I visited all 9 provincial head offices every year, and over a period of 3 years I visited all 85 district offices, and we also visited 150 schools over that period. And I was in the field every week in the field. And you know what? One of the things that astonished me was, amidst all this corruption and inefficiency that's happening, there are people there doing a good job. And you know, that experience led me to believe that it won't be a big thing to turn around the civil service, to make it an efficient machine that delivers services. Because there are people there who want to do it, and there are people there who can do it. But there's just too much other stuff going on for it to happen properly in a 100% efficient way. So I just want to get that out of the way. Let me talk about work integrated learning, because I think a number of you spoke about that. And you know, our universities, in fact, they can't do a proper job of this part because there's not enough money for them. You know, I spoke to your dean this week, actually, Nadine.
Yeah.
And I was talking to her about the work integrated learning part. And I was saying, Nadine, you know, how do you supervise your kids when they go to schools? She says, we only do it for the 4th years because we can't afford, we don't have money to send people into schools to work with our student teachers. So yes, that's why they absorb all the habits the bad habits that are happening in our schools. And in fact, they come out of 12 years of that, observing those bad habits. What are they going to do when they go back to their classrooms? That's where disruption has to happen. And how can it be disrupted? It can only be disrupted by the education faculty people showing them a better way, modeling a better way, going into schools 2 or 3 times a year with them and working with them. And you know, this is one of the reasons why Teach for South Africa appears to be about the same as education faculties, because the education faculties are doing such a bad job of this. You guys don't do it at all, and there's no difference. And in fact, you know, in England in 2010 also, when Michael Gove was appointed Secretary for Education, he said, we're going to bypass the universities. You don't need to do a professional qualification to be a teacher. Just get a degree and go to school, and that's where you learn to teach. Well, you see, he had a point, because the universities are not really adding much value in terms of this work integrated learning stuff. So that's an area that I'm trying to persuade the CETA to fund the university faculties to do work integrated learning much better. They need money to hire people, to hire excellent retired teachers who can go and show the kids in schools what they could be doing. They need money to just get from the university to the school. They haven't got petrol money. You guys know how difficult this is. So you know, that's one aspect that where the system needs to be disrupted, seriously disrupted, in terms of changing that work integrated learning practice. Let me stop there, Jay, because you know there's so much here we can.
No, that's right.
And I'm not the guru here. I mean, everyone else has got. I mean, especially the teachers and the practicing educators.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you very much for revving us up, getting us to think about stuff. I'm taking a few notes as we go along because towards the end, I mean, Robin and Rebuile and myself will have to package this in a way that will make sense. Otherwise, it was a nice tea party, and we don't want that. We want much more. Let's turn our attention to Anne. Anne, where are we with education? What opportunities and constraints are there? Sounds like a PhD, but sort of, some of your thoughts, and then let's have a conversation.
Okay, in fact, we ended, I think, on a good point because, and I should say this, that my background is although I've done a master's in education, I actually did politics as my main focus. So I'm interested in the political economy of the system, and why it's so hard to change. So I've spent many years working on various education interventions. I mean, right from actually, because of the school we were at, in the early 90s, I went with groups of ANC groups to various countries to look at different education systems in terms of how we do things. And I have this love-hate relationship with education because I'm quite passionate about making things work, but the future always looks bleak for education. Actually, it's just depressing. So I think there are opportunities, of which technology sort of is one. If we have the infrastructure, and I think that's a big thing to say because, and it's a certain kind of technology. So I think it's cell phones actually are the real one, and the infrastructure is cheap data. And if we had that, I think that's a real opportunity, and if people thought about that creatively. But the bigger thing is, why are things not changing? And I spent, as I say, sort of 2.5 years working in particular, well, in Free State and KZN, trying to change the system. And we worked in the schools, in the districts, and a little bit at provincial level. But the challenge is how the system works, and it's like the hidden curriculum. It's the stuff you don't see. In an attempt to control the kind of chaos, the decay, the inequality, all of those kinds of things, what we've done as a government is implement policy that kind of says this is what you must do. And so we've established, and this has also come from apartheid, because in fact we didn't throw out the apartheid state. I mean, it wasn't dismantled in any way. Certainly the delivery machinery of apartheid continues, in particular around hierarchy and don't ask questions. It's pervasive. And that policy rules. But what that does is create a compliance culture that says to people, don't think, just do. Tick the boxes, please. And for teachers, well, at every level in the system, that's a disaster. Because as a kind of active thinking practitioner, whether you're a teacher, a principal, a district director, a district, a school support, a subject advisor, and we'll talk about that, you cannot make decisions in a system like that. And so what happens is that you defer those decisions. And so you can have lots of interventions, millions of interventions, and for as long as the people who support those interventions are there, they will work. As soon as people move out of those interventions, we go back to how things were done before, because that's where the authority is. And so if I don't finish my CAPS curriculum by the end of the year, I'm going to be in trouble. So I'm going to finish it, and I'm not going to worry about the fact that half my class actually hasn't grasped the main concepts, because if I don't, then I'm going to be in trouble, etc., etc. And the principal, the same thing. If you're in a matric school, if I don't get my thing improved, then I'm going to be, and the same with subject advisors. Where do they focus? On the matric end, because, that's where all the kudos happen. And those incentives are very deeply embedded. And that's one of the reasons why I think that if we want to change the system, we need radical change. And that radical change actually needs to change with how we think about education in the first place. And I think it means that we have to have a new set of, it's very politically incorrect this, but I think we need new people in the system. Our system is driven by people who, think education is a teacher in a classroom. And it's not driven by, the people who sort of do the architecture, and I'm not saying that architecture is taken, but we haven't had a new thought about education in the entire time, actually. How learning happens, let's put it that way, rather than education. But about how learning happens, I don't know. I think globally it's a problem too, but I can't think of when there was, and technology offers that opportunity, but I don't think we've thought through how that technology would work in context like ours. And that's it's a very good thing. John Rawls, is it John Rawls? John. He's a political philosopher. He talks about a thing called a veil of ignorance. So he says that the best kind of society would be designed if people didn't know where they'd end up in that society. So if you don't know where you'll end up, say, in the South African education system, or where your children will end up in the South African education system, what kind of a system would you design? You would make sure that the kids in the rural areas, or where there's huge inequality or no infrastructure, if you were designing that system, you would make sure that that's where that you think creatively about how do we redirect the political economy to those areas. Because if you don't know where you're going to end up, you're going to make damn sure that if I end up in the poorest and most under-resourced area in this country, I'm going to make sure that the system provides for me and my children. And I think that that's a really important thing, because nothing changes quickly, because those routines, those institutionalized practices are very deeply embedded. We don't see them. They're part of our psyche. They're part of how we think. It's like gender. The kind of assumptions we make about gender, we make the same assumptions. And in South Africa, it's very heavily loaded because it's about sustainable development, actually. Education is the route to development, both economic development, but also, for families, for individuals. And I do think that if we have to think about what do we do, the one thing that we do need to do is to start to have conversations not in the normal places. Okay, so the same people, the same policy elite have been developing policy in South Africa for the last 20 years, 20, 30 years. With due respect to them, because I think they've done a lot. But there's an entire, I have to ask where the middle is as well. But there's both young people and a missing middle, who they're the ones who are going to be in place, not, grade people like me, It's my kids. Or my niece and nephew, actually, who are in their 40s. But someone needs to be taking on this torch in a sense. So I think there's a place for sort of alternative discussions in a way, so that you can do that reimagining and sort of develop new visions. So that's the one thing, and I just the other thing is that I think there should be a public mobilization campaign. I think we need to actually get people, everyone, to fight for education. And fight for education of the poorest and most disadvantaged child in the country. Because people fight for the education of their own children, and if you're privileged, then, you know, usually you can either send them to a private school, or you supplement, or you do whatever you need to do. But those are the kids who don't have that. And those kids are literally the future of South Africa. I did a project on sort of school governance for FREF a couple of years ago. They were looking at various buckets, as they called them, where you can invest in good social investment speak. And one of the recommendations we made there is that a sort of public mobilization campaign gets parents and civil society mobilized. And then they start to ask the questions and support schools, because everybody needs help in the system. Absolutely everybody. I mean, in KZN, one subject advisor supports 300 schools. I mean, you can't do anything. I don't know how some of the people in the system actually get up and go to work every day, because I wouldn't be able to do that. So I think you want like a supportive public mobilization. You know, we love it because the teachers are always, you know, they're the bad. And in fact, we treat them in general like children, actually, the teachers. You must do A, B, and C, tick the boxes. And there isn't that kind of, you're a professional, you make your own decisions and those kinds of things. So those are the two areas. I don't know, I'm sure I'm out of time.
Let me ask you, Anne. No, have you also been triggered now? Yeah. Several things, yeah.
We actually had a little bit of extra time from the previous.
Yeah, so we can, yeah. So Anne, say a little bit more about how we balance the need to catch up versus systemic overhaul. Can we do both? Do we prioritize them, sequence them? And the second one, what can we learn from others? What can we learn from the South Koreans, or the Finns, or the Ghanaians, or the Namibians?
So, so the thing is, in very simple terms, there are things maybe we can change and influence, and there are things we can't.
Right.
So the thing that we can't, certainly in the short to medium term, is change how our sort of socio-economic system works.
Correct.
So, because in an ideal world, and certainly in terms of Vision 2030, what we want is an inclusive developmental economy. The axis we can operate on maybe is the building capacity, building and institutionalizing new capacity, or capacity. I think, and I'm not an educationist, so I know this is heresy, I apologize, but I think that, and I agree with Nick, I mean, I think that what you want to do is just create, in terms of the catch-up process, I suppose, is that people is always the missing factor in change processes. So I think that teachers, but not just teachers, principals, etc., heads of department, are the ones you need to focus on, and you need to do two things. One is you do want them to be able to be confident about teaching kids to read and write. And I wouldn't worry about what happens higher up. I think you just focus on those first 4 or 5 years, as Nick says, and you focus on maths and reading and writing, basically, or the 3 R's. What is it? Reading, writing, arithmetic. I know it's not quite as simple as that, but if you kept your primary focus there, I mean, I would toss out caps, but I can't. And focused on building a strong, professional, committed people who are confident about doing their work and are supported in doing their work. Then what you can begin to do is build on the capacity thing. And that capacity thing, the thing it can't be is piecemeal. As someone was saying, that you can't just have a little bit here and a little bit there. It needs to be one action, actually. Systemic. Has to involve unions, because if you don't get them on board, you're not going to, and they should be part of the public mobilization campaign as well. But we need to actually get people together and say, what are we going to do, and are you behind this, and do this. Okay. And that does mean actually massive mind shift, and that's why I say I think that maybe you have to take out the leadership and put in new leadership. Yeah. Because that's the only way. You know, no, I mean, if you look at, I suppose, Vietnam, you know, they changed their system, and they're tiny, obviously, and radically turned their system around. But they literally, put in a new system. Yeah. Yeah. So they redid everything, and they had new leadership. So I don't think it's easy, and I mean, I think globally, and this is the other tension, which I didn't speak about, is that there's a tendency in South Africa to kind of, you know, take on global rationalities. We take on policy that's been done in other areas and said, oh, that must work here, except not thinking that here we have mindsets, institutionalized practices, etc., that doesn't allow for that easy transition. And for example, in South Africa, one of the things we have here is a very well organized union movement. In a lot of countries that do that change, they don't. I mean, all the kind of, you know, just generally, the big developmental countries could change because they didn't have to, you know, China didn't have to negotiate with all those cities about the Three Gorges dam. You know, they just moved millions of people and made a dam.
Or lock them down.
Yes. Yeah. But what I'm saying is that sort of doing democracy and development is hard. Okay, because you have to negotiate the development. You can't just do the development, and there are always trade-offs.
That's right.
And it's also very hard to do democracy and address inequality. And in South Africa, I think that's where the big challenge is. We have to find ways to support and grow the poorest of the poor in South Africa, particularly in the education system. Because, otherwise the future is bleak, and we won't have to wear sunglasses.
Thank you, Anne. I saw several hands. Are we thinking about what she said?
While others are thinking, I just want to touch on a point, and I want to say that I echo most of her sentiments in terms of, I just want to focus on the CAPS curriculum, which has been implemented at the moment. The observation is we base teaching and learning on quantity and not quality. It does not allow for repetition of concepts. It does not give time for learners to grasp a concept properly before you move on to another concept. And then I want, when we have to submit stats to the department with curriculum coverage, I want to believe how authentic or how honest educators are in giving that stats. Because if you find a teacher is absent for a whole week and haven't covered a particular concept, and then you're giving stats, I have met 100% curriculum coverage. Because if you had then submitted 70%, the question is asked, why didn't you complete the other 30%? And so the teachers actually play safe by being dishonest, by giving incorrect stats, because that will be the reflection of the teacher, the school. And everyone puts in, when I see the tool, everyone puts in 100%. All right? And you know it's not realistic and it's not honest. So what is happening there at district level and so forth they are making informed decision based on stats, which is not necessarily true. Because no school wants to be put in a sort of category of being an underperforming school. You understand? That is stigmatization and labeling of the school. So what you do, give them what they want to hear, but then again coming, you know what, we want to be the best district. You know, we want to look good. So we lose focus and there's too much of ego involved in it. You understand? And as going back to grassroots level, the poor child in the class suffers the most. And then furthermore, the child of the poorest, suffer in the system. Hence, we have what we have at the moment.
Let me just see how many hands we have.
Yeah? Did you see that?
No, I didn't. So let's start with those who haven't spoken before. We'll start with you and then we go to you. And then I'll take the rest.
Oh, no, thank you so much. I wanted to actually to talk through and in case of compliance. But you was already touched on that, but I wanted to say, you see, with compliance comes frustration in the sense that we have to comply so that we are seen as doing a job. Then it becomes now quantity versus quality. When they come and check for compliance, it's how many number of classworks do you have? Does it meet the standard? How many homeworks did it do? Does it meet the standard? So it's now we're focusing on compliance instead of focusing on teaching and learning. So I want to know from Anne, what is her input, or does she speak to the people concerning the issue of giving the learners quality education? It's even worse for us in township schools. So we want to know that is there a space where they talk about these issues so that they can be able to assist? Because what happens is that the learner goes to the next grade, the learner knows nothing. But the learner has completed a curriculum, as we say. So I just want to know, is there a space given for such discussions, because they are just a sore to us, mostly educators?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you make the point very well. Yes.
I want to go back to ECD practitioners. I hear that this is about teachers, most especially in the foundation phase. But when we look at when we want to reimagine education and when we want to improve the quality of education in South Africa, it also needs to start there, because the children that are moving to foundation phase, secondary phase, and all of that, university, the foundation is built in ECD. So then, since the function shift has been shifted, that ECD practitioners are with DBE now, the issue of qualifications has not changed ever since 2019. It hasn't changed. They haven't been integrated into the system of DBE. And that what she spoke about, the curriculum, I don't know what it's called, about values and norms and motivation.
The hidden curriculum.
It's not there when it comes to ECD practitioners. They are there actually to babysit the children, which is not how it should be. And then when we compare to the schools that are here in Joburg, let me pick a school in Bedfordview. Yeah. It's a different mindset because they have the resources, they have everything. Kids are actually taught how to read and write. But when we go back to the township schools or the village schools, it's not the picture that we want to see, because there's more play pedagogy than what it is that is here, that is about teaching children. So I want us to reimagine education, and in that we need to actually integrate the ECD practitioners, because they have now been integrated back to DBE. So what when it comes to the level of quality of education that we want to see with our children for the future?
Thanks for that point. And you're taking notes? Okay. Who is not... Oh. I just want to pick up on somebody who's not yet had a chance.
Okay.
Your eyes are big. I know you want to say something.
I think for me, and you'll excuse my anxiousness, is because truly I just don't think we're listening. I think we're trying to diagnose and we're not creating space. We're trying to look for time in the middle of crisis, which is necessary for the change. Some of the ambassadors that we were dealing with, we call them our COVID cohort, because when COVID hit, they had to go home, but they still had to teach. I like what Anne mentioned about infrastructure. What ended up happening with a lot of our ambassadors is that they were sending assignments via cell phone. They were organizing kids in homes with the person who had the most data, and then they were sending each other assignments back and forth into the night. So, and maybe I've written something that might be out of turn, but if you really want to understand the soil, don't ask the farmer, ask the ant. We're not, we're not listening. So at this point, we need to be looking at intentional design to problem solving. Intention requires a little bit of patience and a lot of grace. We have amazing people doing amazing things. The policies are ill-informed, and as you say, we have all of these ceilings that are keeping our teachers from being able to perform, or being able to be creative, because I think at the end of the day, the hidden curriculum is what is getting our teachers to start food gardens, after-school classes, choirs, debate clubs. That's not going to be taught in the curriculum, and that's what's keeping kids out of the streets. That's what's keeping them in class. We have ambassadors, we've been placing them for the last week, and in December we were doing school visits. And one of them created a night school, which meant the community could come and parents could come. So when you're talking about inspiration, when you're talking about the hidden curriculum, I think what psychology has done is diagnose. I believe in narrative, I believe in listening to the story. I like what you said, Anne, about changing the location of the conversation, because this boardroom doesn't have a bunch of ants in it. Sorry. I don't mean to. We're missing. Did you invite a learner today?
They're in school.
Well, yes. No, I mean, but the point being is that you also scheduled this during placement week. Did you consider the learner when you had this? Did you ask them if there was maybe a school holiday where you could have done this on a Saturday? That's what I mean. Like, the response is, oh yeah, but they're in school. I was like, no, but you could have waited until the weekend, because you can make time on the weekend because you have a car. So yeah, what can we learn from others? Institutionalizing new capacity or capacity focus on ECD literacy and maths. We are diagnosing and not listening. Yeah, so that is focus on the narrative. If we are not listening to change the narrative, how do we know what we're going to tell as a new story? How are we going to change the story? So it's a lot of that, it's a lot of questions. So Anne, thank you for prompting all of that. And maybe my question to you at this point is, how do we create time in crisis? Because everything is urgent. And how do we do that for teachers and educators and faculty who are constantly busy? 300 schools is already impossible. So where do they find time to care? And by the way, who's caring for them? Mr. Masamula was in a conversation about dropout. And we had to speak about educators who just don't have the support. They are tired, they're in relationships, they have marriages, they have children, and they have to go and parent because parents are absent. Where is the time in crisis? So those are just some of, and maybe my question to you is, how do we create time in crisis for change?
Thanks. You want to add?
I just want to take cue on the capacity issue.
And then I'll come back to you.
Okay, it's fine.
No. Your question.
All right.
And then I'll come back.
And you raised very important issue around the capacity, and I think Tabia is picking up in a way of it. In its form, whether it's infrastructure or human resource, finance, whatever it is, the minister says there's 900,000 matriculants who wrote, and a certain percentage got bachelor passes, which could amount to about 360,000 students who get bachelor passes. I had 182 enrolled. I got 54 bachelors, which can come out to about 84, 86 children. Do we have the capacity at tertiary level to absorb the 360? Because our way is to get every student in university. Does the university have that capacity? As we rethink education, are we talking enough about TVET? Are we talking enough about technicons? Because these children are going to end up in the street with their bachelors because they're waiting to get into university. In one conference, a Zimbabwean professor was asked, how do you come around this in Zimbabwe because you don't have much in terms of infrastructure? He said, we've digitalized teacher training. We've digitalized university programs. People can study from home. Online teaching, as we are saying, they're WhatsApping, they're exchanging material. How rigorous, how hard are we pushing on that in the advent of COVID? Because I see thousands and thousands waiting to queue at university. You know the crisis we had with walk-ins and all that. Someone somewhere is killed, one side, because he's waiting to get into university. I'm advocating that we need to start moving as a country, learning from what COVID has imposed on us, much more on programs that allow people to learn and study at home. Otherwise, we're not rethinking how we can educate our people without having to be in four walls. Thanks.
Can I just push you on that one? Do you think the politicians and the decision makers, those who have power to decide, know this?
They should know.
They do.
They should know.
They do.
Yeah.
Why then don't they act on it?
It's politics, it's money, it's I mean, Anne has touched on it. Yeah.
It's not that simple though.
It's not that simple.
It's a system that's stuck, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to shout at the guys on top and say, why are you not doing this?
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, changing a system is massive. It's
Can we change it? Yes.
You know, and even if you want to intervene in a system, it's going to take you 15, 20 years to do, right? So Vietnam can do what they want because they're a centralized government and everyone does what they do. Normal countries don't do that, right? So
you have to negotiate as you...
Well, not more than negotiate, but I mean, I heard once one of the DGs said, so South Africa's policy, education policy is, if you can't do it for everyone, you can't do it for no one. It's an unwritten rule in the department, right? So all these fancy stuff we try and do, every time we go to the departments, they say, well, are you going to do it for everyone? No, we can't. We can't give everyone a tablet. Then no, you can't do it for it. Because of the whole inequality thing, all of that. So I just want to say that, yeah.
Got you. Right. I need to come back to you, but I see your hand. Yes.
I just want to respond to, with statistics, to scale the problem that is highlighted.
Yeah.
This year, and I'm just going to quote the numbers,
yes.
This year universities across South Africa had 4,154,976 applications for first year entry, for only 162,930 spaces. So there are so that gives you an idea of scale.
Only 900?
For only 162,930 spaces.
Across
This is
all
across all universities in South Africa.
Yeah.
So what you find is the scenario where students are applying at multiple universities, desperate to get in.
Yeah.
If I bring it more home to you, Jay, for PGCE, we have 330 spaces. We had more than 15,000 applications, of which only, I think, 1,100 and something met the minimum requirements. So it gives you an idea of just how big this animal is.
Yeah.
But I think what we're overlooking, and I want to move on to another point, we are overlooking a unique opportunity for teacher education. There was a report recently from the Stellenbosch University in terms of teacher provision and supply and demand, where conversations are happening about ramping up teacher education within the next few years
given that we have this bubble at the top with a large number of teachers that are going to be moving out of the system through age, through leading into other sectors, etc.
Education as well.
Exactly. So we have a unique opportunity here. If we are going to rapidly increase the number of teachers, that means that we are going to rapidly release a body of newly qualified teachers within the system that can bring change, that has the potential of bringing change into those systems. So are we overlooking this? And linking to what Anika said earlier, if we really want to bring change, we need to invest in bringing the universities or the teacher education spaces. We need to invest there so that we could bring this change and up the quality of that newly qualified teacher that is released in the system, not just with content knowledge, not just with the maths knowledge, but also, as we linked and spoken about the reading curriculum, the ability to bring change to that space, to amplify the values, the morals, the type of learner that we want to have in the system. Because the system is so huge, it is so difficult to bring change, but there's a unique opportunity here.
Good point. Let me ask you to speak, and then I think we can wrap up with Anne, and then we take a break.
Just to comment on just some of the things I've heard.
Sure.
One is I think we're getting a bit stuck on where is the crisis. And I think we have a specific problem, and we're trying to solve a general problem. We're trying to solve a general problem, but we have narrowed it to there's a crisis. So the crisis, which is what you're saying, how do you find time in a crisis? It would seem to me that you actually have to say, you have to define your problem. Because the overwhelming problems that we find in underprivileged schools becomes then the discussion about transforming education, which is not. Here you're talking about fixing the system, which is different from talking about overhauling education. That's a different. That leads you to different ways of how to do this. This leads you to, in the meantime, I'm a social worker, so I'll speak from social work perspective. As a social worker, I start with, okay, you don't have a job. We're gonna find tea and food today. Can I fix that? So you're sorted, so we can sort out the job. And this is what we have. There are immediate things that we need to deal with, and that's the crisis. That is felt, the crisis is right through the system. And it's also the fact that the issue of equality and equity is a big issue. Because the crisis we're talking about on one side of the system does not quite exist on the other side. Which is why the other the equity and equality issue is going to find itself in the workplace. Okay? Yeah. Because your most matriculants who get the best bursaries, who get the best opportunities, are going to be the privileged. Okay? And if we're looking at the number of dropouts, if we were to look at them by race, you would see who's been left out of the system. So the essence is that the African child is left behind. Primarily the African child, followed very closely by the so-called colored child, and then the Indian child. And it's important to know what you're trying to deal with. So that's one problem. Then globally, it's a different problem. And that is this, the classroom is one place that has remained untransformed. We still even call it classroom. I don't even know whether it's relevant. But when did we start saying classroom? If you were to go into medicine and see how much progress has been made over time, teaching seems to change curriculum, tinker this and tinker that, but we haven't, gone to what Anne is talking about. What is education in 2023? Do kids need to sit in the school for how many? 12 years? Is it necessary? Is it just another form of babysitting? Is there a coincidence between those number of years and when they become adults and we can say, you're 18 now, you've done your matric, you're 18, bye-bye. See. So we don't want to deal with them when they're 16 or 15, when they have the energy. We don't want to deal with that. But that
is not a now problem. The now problem is the crisis that we face of the number of children. So I just wanted to say that if we are to be true to how can we reimagine education, first we have to say what is now and what is the problem, and we deal with it. The reimagining chair is we need all the innovators in the room. We need the thinkers in the room. We need everybody in the room. We need the children in the room. We need the parents in the room to guide us to reimagining for South Africa. An African child who is no longer being trained for the African economy. He's trained for the global economy. How do we train these children? What does it mean to compete in the global economy? You know? So I just think it's important to say, instead of, we will end up with a conclusion that says we need to fix the teachers, but we are fixing one side of the system. We're not looking at education, not the education of the black child who's left behind. That's a serious problem. The black child, the African child, is seriously left behind.
Course correction, thank you very much. Yeah, very good. Would you like to say a few words? Yeah.
So I think I'm saying two things. One, I think I am trying to say we need to change the narrative, actually. And I agree with you about listening and the stories. When I was working in KZN, I was just blown away by what teachers do, or principals do, or district directors do entirely, you know, with their own resources in very tough conditions. And those are stories that will begin to change the narrative. But I also want to say why I think the system, and by the system I mean from that African child all the way up to a Minister of Education, how civil society interacts, the whole thing, is that I think one of the challenges we have is we change the policy, but we don't change the system. The system continues to produce what it produces. And so you could send 500 brand new teachers into those schools, but in the end they're going to learn from the teachers who are already there, unless someone is supporting them to practice differently. And that means you need a principal who will support them to do that. You need the district who supports them to do that. You need a province who does that, etc., etc. And at the moment, we don't have... I mean, when I did that work in 2016 around governance, the big thing that came out of the children is nobody cares. Nobody cares. And somehow we need to create a system that cares, I think. And I think that's very hard, and a starting point might be to, well, I think there are two starting points. One is just to get people to talk to each other, because people actually don't talk to each other anymore. They sort of bellow at each other, or and to listen in that talking, so that it is an equitable engagement. And the other is to mobilize people. And I just want to, I'm going to use it's an academic example, but I think this is how deeply embedded the system is and what we're working with. So Foucault talks about Bentham's panopticon, which is a prison. And it's a prison in which, in the central tower, is glass, where the guards in the prison can see out, but the prisoners cannot see in. And what Foucault actually argues is that those prisoners learn to self-regulate under the threat that there's a guard there all the time, and if I do something wrong, then there will be a consequence. And so his argument is this is how society works. Eventually you can take the guard away and people will self-regulate. And so actually, as soon as children get into the classrooms, we're teaching them how to self-regulate. We all learn this. It's like driving on the left-hand side of the road, stopping at stop streets. All of those kinds of things is self-regulated behavior. And the system is structured at the moment, unfortunately, to create not self-regulation, but actually compliance. It's forced regulation, which causes the kind of frustrations you're talking about. And it's with good intention, because it's to try and improve the system. But what it does is it takes away agency. And when you take agency away from people, they don't take responsibility. And somehow, and I mean both within the system and sort of socially, you know, so people will say to teachers, well, they're at school now, you must sort them out. You know, parents will say that. Or so everyone sort of just, you know, passes on the problem. And that's why I think those discussions and a sort of mobilization program, a kind of, I mean, the narratives, the stories you're talking about, can begin to build a different understanding about education and what it should be about. Certainly not about matric results. And mostly about, you know, the stories of those. Because when we do hear stories about, you know, rural kids gone good, it's because they've got a fantastic matric against all the odds. But actually that should be the norm.
Yeah.
You know, all rural kids should actually be able to get an education that's... And the thing is, I really do think if we're creative around, especially cell phone technology and data, you can use a whole lot of that to support teachers, to support district officials, to do all sorts of things. You know, I think we can reinvent. So I'll leave it there.
Sure.
But it's not easy.
No, I think we all understand that. Okay, as we contemplate the new philosophy of education, let's take a body break. I hope there's tea and coffee and snacks outside. The aircon is back. I think we're in
Yeah, snacks.
a good space.
And then we can organize coffee and tea as well.
Yeah. Make your calls, take your calls, 15, 20 minutes, and then we come back. Thanks very much.
So check Nick's Facebook profile.
Oh, yeah.
Colleagues,
All the contacts.
colleagues.
That's okay.
Video team, photographer, sound system, engineers, participants, observers. Are you an observer? No, the other observer is not. She left. And Nick said he had to go as well. He came to deliver messages. Did you see that? He wasn't interested in us. So we're going to nail him next round, because I was chatting informally with some of you, and I think there's appetite to develop this into a forum where voices can be heard, and maybe make it less silly. The venue here and the boardroom is so impressive, but we might want to maybe go out into a setting where we will find those who talk to us. And I think Umlambo Foundation has programs in some of those schools and districts that will allow us to maybe go there. So I'm thinking of how we convert this into a vehicle where we can discuss, analyze, and said to me over tea, we've analyzed the problem to death. We've written books about this. There are journals and articles, and you know, let's not redo all of that stuff. Let's learn from that, pick up the knowledge we have, because the real question is, what do we do with this, and how do we assist? We want South Africa to be a winning nation. How do we do that? And we want to give every child an opportunity to shine. And how do we do that? So I think this is more or less the road we want to take, perhaps with the support of our two partners. But I think it's better for me to ask Tumi to reflect on the theme that you were given.
Yes.
Yes, which is, what can we learn and how can we do better?
That was a very good introduction to that theme.
Yeah. So I'm just gonna kick the can over now to you, and ask all of you to listen,
and then respond to him, because he's going to be tough on us, I know. And then after this exchange, we will bring things together. Okay.
Thank you. It's a task that was given to me, or rather suggested, but I think it is one where it's not so much about Dumi and what can we learn, or what Dumi is proposing that we can learn or we can do better, but as a collective, how do we bring the collective skill sets together and foster change, amongst other things. I think, when I was talking to, I call him Bongs or Bongani on these type of things, insofar as the question is what can we learn, but rather what do we know, amongst other things, right? We know the challenges that we are currently facing as the country. We know that there are a lot of interventions that have been done by various organizations at the schools. But do we know, or at least have a sense of what these interventions are? What are we tracking, amongst other things? The various organizations have a certain tracking method aligned with CAPS and the likes. But those things, where are we amongst us as a collective skill set? Is there a possibility, as one of the suggested recommendations, where we can sit and say, theses have been written, suggestions have been made. Can we at least not reinvent the wheel, but rather develop tangible actions? But those actions are going to be, infertile or ineffective, I must say, if we don't take into account poverty, inequality, and unemployment. I think Mama Wile, insofar as we are trying to come up with some of these solutions, or we are critiquing, but we are not looking at what the reality is. It's the black child, Otwan Soweto, Vembe, and all over, who gets left behind. And we know the challenges of unemployment, inequality in those. And spoke about the 21st century education. Are we crafting it, or at least can we, or is there research related to, are we really getting our kids ready for the world of work in these trying and dire circumstances? And if not, what can this forum or collective at least make a recommendation or suggest, so that the patron is able to say, we sat here, we've had this discussion, and we really need to start thinking of things differently? Because you're absolutely right insofar as compliance and systems. But what COVID had shown us was we can actually be innovative, we can be creative, and also, despite a crisis that was deadly at the time and still is, interventions were there, and we're able to come up with various aspects. And I'll throw it to Wongs. I mean, bankers, civil society, they have money. We need to go in and say, how do you fund research, amongst other things, to come up with tangible solutions? As part of your SDG aligned goals, as a bank, as any business for that matter, what is it that you can do with Letsema, with Umlambo Foundation, to take these tangible aspects forward and be in a position to track, taking your money and being able to say the return on investment is, we're in Vembe, and this is what we've done. We've invested in ECD, because the foundation phase is quite important. I think the parting shot on what can we learn is parents' involvement. I mean, we spoke about the realities and everything else, but what about that? What can we say, or rather we should be advocating for, where we ensure that there are interventions that have been derived, but the parents are absent. How do we then get the mobilization that was mentioned here, and for it to be effective? One of the things that we did through our organization, Country Duty, during President Jacob Zuma's time, and it was when they were introducing on that day the secret ballot. We then sat and we said, what can we do with technology, Twitter in particular at the time? And we then devised a strategy, and we said, went to the Parliament website, it lists all the ministers and their contact details. One of the guys at the time said, listen, I can schedule tweets and then we can have captions, right? Where it says, Dear Minister, and then you can mention them. Please vote with your conscience and it's for the country. Kinako, do your part. And that's what we called it. And it was at 12, and I'll get to the point, before 2 o'clock at that time when the tweets started dropping. And Fikile Mbalula was giving a press conference and his phone was going wild because there was a tweet mentioning the minister. Before him, the DG is getting it and stuff. And he was like, this is bigger than you and it's about the country at the time. Obviously appreciating the politics and otherwise. But people were taken on that. I mean, it was in the press to say, we didn't even think of it, but it was a proper mobilization where people listened and said, I didn't even know that his phone number is on the Parliament website and these people are accountable to us as a public. So my point on this is, how do we, speak to Ntabi as a collective here and talk about storytelling? I think there's so much that has been done. There are interventions that have happened, and rather, how do we then take that, speak to campaign managers over and above social media, speak to, again, civil society, your TV channels, and say, we need to have these interventions becoming part and parcel of your programs and initiatives. Because if we are going to sit here, still discuss that this is the failure, this is the crisis, and everything else, will most likely end up as a talk shop. And I think there are lessons on this, and we can use our power, our influence, the skill set that we have to really say, we are not reinventing the wheel, but rather there are at least 10 implementable or points or interventions that we can come up with here. And when we reconvene at Vembe or in Soweto next year, we are looking at how have we done, or at least have tracked it. And it's not something that is not in a report from the foundation or otherwise, but things that are already known and the likes. And maybe just before I give Bonks, insofar as the better aspect, we at least are privileged to have Mama Phumzile, who can really help with her global reach to say, buy into this, these are some of the things. And that relates to cell phone companies subsidizing the delivery towards data. In fact, there's case law, amongst other things, where really, if you start thinking, and we could use various strategies, where right to education is a constitutional right? But the access to data equally should be and is. And why can we not, lobby these bankers, lobby these cell phone companies to really get some subsidy of some sort or incentive like they do in Skills Setter, where we are sponsoring 100 gigs of X amount in this particular school, and as a result we'll get a certain percentage or of offset or something like that. And these could be legislated or otherwise, but these things can be done, but we need new leadership. With respect to the current leadership, I just think that they are out of touch with the challenges that we are facing. It was scary hearing Anne talk about, and I think, no, not Anne, when you mentioned the stats versus, the capacity and what the universities can take, and actually the number of people who've applied. Services seaters and the technicals are quite alternatives and very attractive ones. But there's no mention in when the ministers and the panyazas are speaking of saying, explore these opportunities and having the seaters tell their story, their success. I mean, with the rebates that they get, it's not, a few millions, it's almost $1 billion. And I won't talk about the corruption with the seaters, that's a different discussion. But the point is, we already have existing vehicles such as TVET colleges, the seaters, that can be alternatives. And the question, I think, for us here is, how do we engage the seaters at our next sitting to make those options attractive? What is the offering, what has been the success rate, and really punt it and use our influence as such. But there's so much work that needs to be done. We are also not talking about the mental health of the teachers. As parents, we've outsourced parenting to the teachers. We have societal ills, and I think if you look at what social development is doing, Department of Education, they all have these interventions, but I don't think no one has came in and said, how does your intervention, piggyback on mine? Can we collaborate here and do X, Y, and Z? So each one wants to shine rather and be able to say, but I've achieved X or anything. But if you want to address, as I said, poverty, inequality, and unemployment, it needs to be strategic and properly coordinated. And that's why we are hoping, as a recommendation, we can start saying, let's get the Minister of Education, Social Development, and other key, Treasury and all of those, to say, these reports, there's hundreds of them, but we've done a good job, we've summarized them. We think these are the 10 action key points. And those are not going to be new in any event, because these are things that have already been said and are being looked at, and we bring the expertise in this room and outside to be able to support them and really sell an idea or a product to them. So it's really a combination of us as a people leading the change, the skill set here in this room, coming up with tangible action, someone owning certain of these actions, such as the tracking, where are we, what does it look like, and not reinventing the wheel. But I'll pause here, and obviously we'll have that discussion, but I know that Bongs also want to just touch on, what can we learn, what can we do better, and perhaps maybe either share, and again, putting him on the spot, the financial service industry on commitments to SDG 4, amongst other things, and if there's work that's been done there.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Ole. So, on the financial services industry, or any other industry for that matter, I think there's no shortage of money in this country being invested in education. Money is not the real problem.
In fact,
right?
private sector funding exceeds funding from global partners in South Africa.
Absolutely. So there's lots of money that we put towards education. And you speak to any specific sector, they will tell you the question is, where's the money going, right? Once we've invested it in a particular space, where does it go? Does it actually go in contributing towards the intervention that we're really trying to make? So when private funders start pulling out, it's not because they don't have the money to put in education, but the money is not going anywhere. There's no change in the system that we're seeing with all of the millions that we're introducing into the space. So I work with a couple of partners together with the government. There's lots of work that government is doing to try and change the education system. There's a presidential group that's run by Yellowwoods. You might know Yellowwoods. It's a big company. They own Nando's and a lot of other insurance companies, billionaires. So we work with them to try to reimagine education in this country, right? And spoke about reimagine learning, right? We are still living in the industrial area. If you go to a class where you have kids sitting in a row and you have a teacher there instructing them, right? That's the current situation, right? What COVID did teach us, as Tumi was saying now, is we can reimagine education, actually. If we have the political will to do so, we have the partners that intervene. So we spoke about the MTNs and Vodacoms and so forth, and them, reducing the price of data. But do you know that they have actually zero-rated some of their services directly related to education, right? So actually a child in rural Soweto or Vembe can actually get access to educational material zero-rated by the likes of MTN and Vodacom. So that's why I'm saying there is
University students.
Exactly. There is the private sector is doing what they can, because what we are seeing now is, all of you know, the youth unemployment rate in this country, almost at 70%, right? Now, so we're busy churning out these kids at primary to high school to university. They are not work ready. They are not ready for the world that is out there right now. So how do we imagine education to create a work ready or self-employment ready youth that is going to be able to change the dynamics of the socio-economic situation that we find in this country? And as a private sector, at least where I come from, we are doing that work. So we're focusing on digital education with Yellowwoods, right? We are identifying institutions such as Southern Labs, which is an institution that started a couple of years ago, and they are reimagining education as well. How do we actually reimagine education outside of this industrial era type of situation to create young people that are work ready, right? That can come into the system. We're working with a lot of partners. We're working with the likes of Capitec, Time Bank, a lot of, so there's the will, there's the money. In fact, when we spoke to the Yellowwoods crowd not so long ago, I had a session with them at Constitutional Hill, because it's a historical space, so we use that for creative thinking as well. And I said to them, I'm in the financial services sector. What can we do together? Can we create an education bond of some sort, right, to get partners to invest in it so we can reimagine education holistically? They said to me, well, when we have enough money, we're sitting with 150 million right now that we want to distribute, but we don't know where to start or how to start to do it. So we don't need to find new funding mechanisms.
Hands are going up. Here's your answer.
The point is the money is there. So it's not a lack of money. There's enough money. We have lots of philanthropists, former South Africans that live overseas now, who are willing to invest in this country's future. Right? Guys, we have billions here. Right? We can invest. We have people that we work with in the university sector where they are willing to sponsor a student from day one up until they find them a job. Whatever you want, they hire psychologists for you because they realize that some students come from certain backgrounds. So to just throw you at UCT or Stellenbosch without the mental support, that in itself could be, it creates a situation where you're not on the same level playing field as students that have those abilities because they come from better financial circumstances. So we can take a student, give them that financial support, mental support. In fact, some private funders even pay for the students' medical aid from day one. So we have funders that are willing to invest in this country's education, but where does the money go? So the bureaucracy, the compliance, the systems, if you don't change all of that, right, you'll continue having people saying, well, it doesn't make sense for us to keep on throwing the money at the problem when we don't see the change. So when you reimagine education, you have to start from the day that the child goes to crash up until they go to work. It's a value chain. You need to think about the entire value chain, right? The day that the child goes to crèche or primary school, up to university, up to them finding a job. Because ultimately, right, we want people to be able to be financially sustainable, to sustain themselves, to have work, or to create jobs. Because it's not education for the sake of education, surely. Right? We're not talking education just for the sake of people learning something. It's ultimately they have to be members of society that contribute, right? So you have to think of the entire value chain, and that's some of the work that we're doing. So there's lots of interventions, there's lots of skill sets. There are a lot of people that are willing and able to put, their financial resources, their skills, and all of that. But we need the interventions also at the policy level. Because some of these things you can't do, because this is how education works in this country at the moment. This is how it's legislated. That's why one of the reasons we can't solve ESCOM quickly is because there's legislation that prevents us from doing the things that we need to do. So that's how the country works. Legislation prevents us from really doing the big interventions, and we all know how slow the pace of changes in legislation is, right? So we can do a lot on the private side, but ultimately you need to plug into the bigger system. So you have to reimagine learning, as Anne was saying. You have to reimagine it. Learning is not just standing in front of a class. It's what we're doing here. This is learning. This is education in itself, actually. What we're doing today, it's learning.
Sure.
That's how you learn. Yeah. Reimagine it. You'll be amazed at what you can achieve. And we have, as a collective here, the mental and the will. The mental capacity and the willingness to change the way that education is done. So let's take this as the first phase of the things that we can do. We can commit to bringing the right partners on board because they are there, they exist. They are there, they are willing to come and help, right? And they're everywhere in the world, not just in South Africa. There's proper patriots who want to come and reinvest in this country. But we have to create the platform, right? That's ultimately, that's it. If the platform doesn't exist to reinvest, you're not going to invest where you're not going to reap the rewards. And the rewards in education is to see a successful youth that's able to get into employment, able to create their own employment and be self-sufficient and contributing citizens and bringing dignity back to the people. That's what people really want to see. So that's why they want to invest, to be able to achieve that. But if the money is going somewhere into other people's pockets, people start pulling back. So yeah, that's my contribution.
Change management, starting from politicians to everyone, and us, how we do things. The ability not to work in silos, being able to, and I mean, I'm impressed. There's vets and UJ here in the same room, and connections and UNISA as well, you know, and everything else. But what it means is we need to then, as accountability partners, as people who are going to ultimately be co-authors of the report, as you said, we need to be able to leverage on what has UJ done, VETS, UNISA. Are we really, for example, you know, passing your masters, your PhDs, dealing with the same thesis, but it's mentioned differently? Where is it going? Is it housed somewhere? Can we rather, and I think someone has mentioned that there's a collective that is happening of researchers all over, but we know what the problem is, or at least have an idea, but what is tangible and what does it look like? I think the politicians, amongst other things, are going to be overwhelmed when we throw certain things and not in pieces and stuff that they can digest. And we need to start thinking, how do we make that creative for them so that ultimately they can take the shine, but we know that we've intervened and we've done our part, because that's what it is, you know. Look, we sat here, it's 3 years now, we've tracked this progress. I was there and I was part of it. But if anything, for us, as colleagues sitting here, we will be able to say that we've at least changed lives and we've done our part as South Africans. And it would be your child or someone else's, but it will then alleviate all those inequality, poverty, and unemployment, and we can at least look back and be proud of that. So I'm really, and we are advocating for, you know, not working silos, working together, and keeping this momentum going. We can't just meet on World Education Day because it's declared by the United Nations and our other things. And again, we go back and say it's a tick box. You see, we're here like everyone else, you know, because someone else has done it somewhere at an earlier time zone. What did South Africa do? We're here. Then what then? You know, let's have this discussion next time. So we really have to parting short, if I were to be controversial and ask, last year this time, what was the discussion? Were we talking about the same thing, or is this the first of many? And I hope it is, which with a view of saying it was a first of many that will, you know, accumulate in change, and we can later on in life say we were part of it and we've done our part. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. I heard two important things. The first one is there's goodwill.
Yes.
It's waiting to be unleashed.
Yes.
If we can structure the flow.
Yeah.
Okay, and make it attractive. Yeah. And because of what you just said, I want the CEO of Umlambo Foundation, Reboile, just tell us in 5 minutes what it is that's happening in that foundation for some of us who need that update. Because what can you see the connection? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's stuff happening already, and I think what we need to do is that would be. So I'm a trustee of the foundation, so I know what's going on, and I have an interest here in making that thing stronger, because it can become a vehicle with others, you know, to absorb what might be coming. And your point, I mean, it's a good one. It's controversial. So Robin, last year this time, what did you discuss? What happened?
It wasn't everything.
The last one was in COVID.
wasn't it?
Yeah. We went on hiatus.
That smile is not
back.
We need to improve. Just put us on the spot. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much. Okay. So thank you very much, Prof, for that. And before I start, I just want to thank all of you for coming. I think it has been really insightful. It's been educational. It's been informative. And I think I appreciate the fact that it's been very balanced. So, you know, I think a lot of what is going wrong it came out. And I think as a country, we are very good at defining a problem. I think that we do have no issues with doing that, but it's just implementing and also I think to a degree, also very good at bringing out, at thinking of solutions. It's just we get stuck in the implementation, and maybe politics do play a large part to it. But I also liked when, you know, also, I mean, I think we also can be very good at bashing. especially government. So I liked your contribution that it's not necessarily all bad. Good things are happening. There are good people in the system. And I think that's where Umlambo comes in a lot, is finding those good people and working with those good people and refusing to be defeated. To say that, you know, nothing is happening. I mean, I think all of you sitting around here are doing some incredible work. So that's what we want to align ourselves with the positive narrative. I've had, you know, my little experience in education, which is really not my background. It was by default that I came onto this journey, but I'm enjoying it very much. Is that I've met some really, really good educators, and 2 of them are sitting here. And for me, that has encouraged me to want to push this education thing in the country and to, again, align the foundation with a positive narrative. So Kirshni is here, Sizumpumi is here. I've learned a lot from them. They've been my mentors. Usumpumi, I know I've harassed her since I've met her. And she has taught me more than anyone about the education space. I didn't get it from national government, national office, provincial. It was by a principal who's sitting here that has taught me a lot. And even in the way that I understand what is happening. So not to take a lot of time, with the foundation, just a little history, was started by Dr. Umlambo, who was our deputy president at some point, and then she went on to become UN head of women. So what happens is when they move out of office, they are given an opportunity by the state to continue work in whatever discipline that they choose to. And she chose education because she is a teacher by profession, and that's always been her first love. And when she started, she looked at the public school specifically because of all the problems that we all understand here and appreciate. And she looked at, like a lot of people I think before used to do, at the learner component of the school. And understandably so. But as she was doing that, when she left office, is she also went on to study, to do her PhD. And her research focus was looking at how do we leverage technology in a country like ours to advance education. And as you know that, you know, in Africa, much as we can be called backward, poor, mobile penetration is actually one of the highest in the world in this continent. So she was looking at that. How do we use specifically mobile technology to advance education? But as she was studying, one of the things that she came across, and this is research-backed, is that you need to really focus on the leadership of the schools. We need to empower the leadership. People that are tasked with educating our children, we need to also invest in them directly. So she kind of she changed the focus of the component of the school she was looking at, and she looked at school leadership and management. So that's the little history of the foundation. Currently, we were kind of bullied by COVID to kind of look at things differently and how do we contribute to schools and what was the immediate need at the time. And at the time was digital, everything went online, and you know, teachers were going all over the place, expected to deliver, and they were not having the requisite skills to move the classroom as we know it onto a digital platform. So we did a lot of digital literacy in that we failed a lot because we didn't know what we were doing. So, and so it's been a learning curve. So most of the programs that we did and we're still doing now is how do we assist schools to move the classroom to a digital platform? How do we equip the principal? How do we equip the educator themselves? And how do we expose the learners to various things around education? But especially with the learner is about careers. You know, how do we get a learner to understand the world that they are moving into, the skills that will be required, and also just to better understand themselves as workers of the future. How do we get them kind of exposed, and how do we generate confidence in the whole system, school system as a whole? So, so basically that's what we're doing, having a component where we look at school leadership and management. How do we help support the school principal, the SMT? How do we assist the teachers specifically with digital literacy and all these other things that I've mentioned for the learner? So that's what, in a nutshell. And we really value these kinds of engagements because we always move from the premise that we don't know what we're doing, and we need people like yourselves to assist us and inform the process. Because, you know, one can intervene, You know, Abongsi spoke a lot about what is the goodwill that's out there, the resources. You can have the resources, but if you don't intervene correctly, then you can throw the whole thing to hell.
Yeah.
You know, I was speaking with Tabi saying as well after this that one of the things that we don't do, and I think she's correct, is we don't listen. And one of the things as Umlambo that we try to do is listen. So we can come, we don't want to be high and mighty and say, oh, well, we've got resources from this bank, we've got 5 million, this is what we're going to do for you. But rather the other way around. And in Vembe, we've done that quite a lot. I mean, we spoke with almost everyone, from the district itself to traditional leaders to you name the person. We tried to do that so that we really understand what is it that the people themselves need, as opposed to us throwing a solution that's not informed by anything. So thank you very much to all of you again, and thank you for allowing me to speak about it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much.
Okay, concluding.
Oh.
Yeah, we're almost there. Do you want to add anything?
From my side, no. I'm just glad
Tell
to
us about this partnership that you have.
You don't want to know.
So, no, we've been working with Umlambo for like pretty much the last 4 years, right?
Yeah.
And providing support and guidance as they've tried to reimagine and re-look at how they approach intervening within the schooling system.
Yeah.
So we've hosted Umlambo on many an occasion at Letsema's offices. We've been providing them with some support in getting the structures right as well, and formalizing the organization to ensure that it can effectively raise funding. And we've been partnering and providing strategic guidance in different forms with regards to some of the bigger projects that they've been running out. I don't think Rebs gave due, time to actually the many projects that Umlambo's been doing, and I've been lucky enough to be helping indirectly with them. For example, the digital literacy in the schools, and some of the retreats that we've done with the larger schools and the principals, trying to find ways to help them be more effective and holistically train them beyond just the digital literacy, but also from a leadership perspective, and exposing them to different activities and programs so that they can be more effective principals. So although it's somewhat more indirectly and in the background, it's been less oriented towards direct funding support, but more towards trying to help Umlambo get to a point where it can truly be a much larger and more effective, impactful contributor to addressing the issues that the education system currently faces.
Thank you very much. Before I conclude, let me see if any of you want to respond to this 4 inputs now. There's a hand.
I got the tail end.
Are you
I'll respond. I got the tail end.
That's a Red Bull there. Let me see. You don't want to say anything? Not yet.
Yes.
All right. Stop this.
Right. Thank you. I think just as a young person, very young person, still very close to the ants. But, while I was the ant, my biggest thing was I didn't understand how the deciders on who gets the funding or who gets the bursary, how do they sit in the boardroom, wherever they are sitting. This was when I was in school. How do they sit wherever they are sitting and decide that, no, we just want to find the A+ students, when majority of the black child is almost just average? You're lucky if you get a B because of all the other underlying issues, right? Which were never really taken into consideration, or at least that's what I thought as an ant. But there was no one there to listen to that. And then it perpetuated and continued, still continuing even now, where bursaries are given to the excelling students and the average student remains left behind, right? And then it's very easy for those same people to then come back and say, the same young people, the same young person who was not given that leg up is now unemployable, right? And it's your fault, right? Or you're unemployable, it's the education system's fault, right? When the same private sector comes back and says, we want the degree holders. And then the same people come back and say, why are you not talking about TVET? why would we talk about TVET if we're not employing TVET graduates, right? So then I listened to you, Dumi, when you said it's important for CETA to make their offerings attractive. I'm like, how much more attractive do we want them to make it, right? But shouldn't the responsibility be of the private sector to say, hey, we actually want those CETA graduates, right? We want those graduates from the colleges. We want those graduates who don't have a bachelor, who didn't go to your UJs and your UCTs and your Stellenbosches, right? But then come back and say, you who wants to go to TVET, here's funding for you as well, right? So in all these discussions, just offering an end perspective, these things also just be considered, that in order for true transformation to happen, it needs to happen for everyone and not just the cream of the crop.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so just a couple more triggers for the so, and maybe nicer ones. I don't want anyone else to leave. So the first, to me, I appreciate what you said. The first thing is, if what we're leaving here, and it's not against you, I think it's us. And maybe it's for the two of you.
Oh my gosh.
If what we're leaving here is saying we're going to meet next year this time, and the output of this discussion is a report, that is very disappointing, right? Because the crisis, as Mom has shown, is so huge that, I met with some church leaders a while back, and I said, guys, we need to do something about unemployment through the churches. They said, okay, let's meet in 6 months' time. And I said, no, you're not getting it. And the person said, oh, do you think we're going to, is that too soon? And I hope we're not like my beloved brothers in the church, right? That you're not. So maybe a challenge to you guys is, can this be more than just a once a year thing? And I promise you, if you send a report, I will not read it. I won't, and most of us won't, right? We don't read reports. Yeah. So if it's action steps, if you're saying, listen, boom, 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 this is what, and it's 5 things that I can read and I can bring my organization and my network into, then I'm with you. So I think maybe just to think about. The other thing is that this has been done many times before, right? PILO, NECT, NRC. We've been at all those meetings. We're part of all of them. And it's like, okay, okay. So if you want to add value to this, you can't solve all the issues, but maybe that what you could add, and especially with your patrons' convening power, maybe it's something that could be a regular. This is very valuable to me. I found a lot of value in just, oh wow, and I still need to ask Gabby saying what she actually means, so we'll have to have coffee about that. But I really find value in that, and I think maybe that's one of your something that you could think of. Yeah. The other trigger, I'll just say, it's not a serious trigger because I still want to ask him for money. So, Bongs, is that there's a myth, back to, what's his name? Nick's thing. There's a myth that NGOs, there's 2 parts there. There's a myth that NGOs don't measure what they're doing and that they waste money. Right? So you guys give us money and then we can't tell you. That's not true. Right? And if you want dashboards and stuff, we can show you that. We can show you. So I think there's also, and there is some education around, and I think you probably agree with me more than, because I don't think you're speaking on your behalf, but there is an education around funding in the country about, don't paint us all with the same brush, right? And even that brush is very nuanced around what different people. So yeah, I just wanted to say that there's something there about also not thinking about us like we just waste money and we don't actually know what we're doing and all of that. There's incredible organizations in this country that are measuring, doing. Yeah. Anyway, let me not talk more.
Yeah, I like that. Good. Thanks.
It's a good trick.
It's a bit of so no, I have to start with an apology. I had an executive meeting that I couldn't. I was presenting at, and I just caught the tail end of your what you were talking about, accreditation. Something when I got into the institution I was being with, they've been going through for 7 years, just to be accredited for teacher training stuff, right? And can I tell you, our platform we started during, actually it was pre-COVID, but we wanted to do a platform where teachers, wherever you are in Africa, you could go and learn. And just, even if it's just skills that I need to upgrade myself without going through the qualified sort of route, right? And can I tell you, in South Africa, we had 500 teachers beginning of last year. By the end of the year, we had 54,000, of 48,000 are from Ghana. In our plan. So we had to actually pause and not take any more people. And I think we have another 10,000 from Kenya. But here's the discussion from dealing with other African countries has been that if something is accredited in South Africa, I find high value in it. Even though it's frustrating for us, they value whatever gets accredited in South Africa. Ghana said that you get this accredited, we will accept it. And that is from the Ministry of Education. That they hold high value because of how rigorous our process is. But at the same time, I want to say, I don't know how we're going to get around accreditation not being a barrier to innovation. Because one of our ideas that we had was micro-credentialing. Just briefly, micro-credentialing is a teacher who's been teaching, as Prof was saying, who was trained under a training college, KwaZulu, etc., Soweto, teaching teacher training kind of thing. But this teacher has gaps in their training. They did a diploma. They've been operating with a diploma. How do we get that teacher to have a degree? But without them losing the comfort and the security of having their job. And also without them feeling like, UNISA is it's a thing beyond me. How do we create a space where they can accumulate enough credits for them to get that degree over a period of time? It being monitored, it being properly working with it, but over a period of time. And how do we micro-credential within a small spaces where, we have this, the teachers are at schools, but they don't have the money, the funding to be a full-time student, being a part-time student, but they can do this as an online where you get it's an MIT model where you get little badges that accumulate your competencies and your mastery of something. So it's those kind of things where when we discussed this with some of the government people, they just looked at us like, are you insane? What are you talking about? They just felt like it was a thing that can never be done for Africa. And for me, it was such a hard thing as a young person who came to present this to them. It's like, what do you mean? No, it's too beyond us. I'm like, but in teacher training, this is where the biggest gap is. In Africa, in South Africa, in all these countries. So I just want to say, how do we work through accreditation and regulating bodies not being a barrier and a blocker for good things that could promote and elevate and motivate our teachers in schools? And then the last one was action steps, back to action steps. And I really hope this is not a once-off thing where we come and sit in a round table and discuss, but actually bring our innovative ideas and present them and get people to problem solve. You've got an app going, bring it here. Let's train it, let's practice it, let's analyze it, let's work with it. And actually let it be that it be a problem-solving situation. You've got Prof, you've got an article you've written, ideas you've got about an article that you want, a research that you're doing. Bring it here. Let us be that team that can flesh it out with you and write that proposal that needs to be written. And I'm hoping that this team could be that, instead of us just coming to talk about this, because we're going to go back into our little silos, forget about this meeting. But if we've got these accountability actions to say, okay, team, we are meeting again in June, and these are the things that we would like. People send proposals, send ideas on what we can build for it. But I'm more on a problem-solving thing than let's have action stuff that okay, here's the process, here's the draft, here's the thing, iterate, let's talk about it, let's come and engage with it. And that's it.
Can I just say one thing? Did you speak to SACE about professional development points?
Yes, so our modules that we've got on the platform are actually says endorsed.
Yeah.
They're also Kenyan endorsed by their KICD. They're also Ghanaian endorsed by their government.
And once they help you micro-credential against those PDPs.
So they were the first people to talk about, but we sort of we were still in discussion with them, but they were still very much like, we've got a backlog from COVID. Why are you adding more problems for us, right? Whereby then we're not just working in South Africa, as I said, but in Ghana we proposed, and the Ghanaian government wants to do it. They're really keen because they've got a much bigger gap than in South Africa. We're much better. We're sitting at like, I think, a small percentage. Ghana and Kenya and Uganda and those countries have a much bigger group of teachers in schools that are not qualified.
Sure.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks. Thanks for sharing. Yes.
I want to bring it back to what the output is from this meeting, and I want to actually challenge each person here. You know, when you fly from here to Europe or wherever, and you fly over Africa, and you fly at night, it's dark. There's not much light that comes from that space. Exactly what's happening here. We're having the most beautiful discussion, everything, but there's nothing that comes from here into the space. So one of the ways in which we can communicate the discussions here is if I challenge each of you to write an op-ed from your own perspective and the things that you've contributed today, and get that out in the media, because that amplifies the voices and the different conversations that are happening in this space today, because we are the only recipients here of the value of the conversations at the moment, you see. But if we each take the task to write an op-ed in the Mail and Guardian, in wherever, you read them every day or every week, there's an op-ed. Somebody's writing something about topical happenings. Pose your problem about the micro-credentialing, you know. Pose your problem about those triggers in the conversations. Pose your problem about the work-ready learner. What does that mean? How do we conceptualize that? How do we move from that? Speak about that we're not listening to the ads. You know, each of us have had such a valuable voice today. And that's a tangible output from today. And it's not the 5 points, it's not a report, it's not anything to that effect. It's a way that I can get the word out from the teacher education space about what we value in our pre-service teachers and how we are trying to change that narrative. So maybe it's a challenge that I want to put to us as an action point. You know, because we each have the ability to voice and to articulate, but let's do it in word and get that out so that people can engage with our voices.
But also there are social platforms. Yeah.
Exactly. But let's write the op-ed and then let's amplify it through the social platforms.
In fact, we can even host a space or what is similar to a podcast on this.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Open it up, you know, to people, and people
Yes.
will then come on.
Absolutely.
We've done it with various brands and other things, you know, and it becomes a conversation, and we'll be fascinated insofar as, you know, people who are committed to change and want to do things and innovative ideas at those platforms, you know. So it could be that, and I do take your point insofar as a report, definitely action point, and that's why also we're emphasizing, you know, when you come with those, they must be attractive to ultimately the principals and people that we're going to sell it to. But it's definitely that the education corner space every month, for example, on what, you know, showcasing the various organizations here. For example, you know, we're happy to do that and bring the following that we have. This month you've done this, what does it look like? This is what we have. And we then are able then to see online what their views are and what people are saying and thinking. The nice thing is these days, you know, you can record it and then chunk it into nice podcasts, and we all know it will get us, but it will be one of those, the education corner, collaboration with various, and I think there's potential of it attracting various people. So it's that, you know, innovation, social media, and other things. But the danger would be to leave behind the learner, the parent, and the rural communities. And you need to to avoid that, because we are quicker, we are here, you know, on WhatsApp and stuff. But if anything, there is a conversation that needs to be had in a language that people also understand.
Yes.
If I'm going to have a space, it will be a combination of English and Zulu, and also be relatable. And it's very key. One discussion we had was on culture with Viceroy on identity and stuff. And this guy said, listen, it's all great and well, and it's English. I'm going to sit here and speak Zulu, because that's who I identify with. And you know, we are qualified as all these things. But today, if we're going to speak about identity and what I do, this is how I'm going to express myself. And it was one of those things, the brand didn't even, you know, they were just so happy to see that and hear it. And they started asking, can we just take segments of this from you, just to share on your views? And I think there's definitely power. But, you know, from our storytellers and everyone, again, on the skill sets that we have, we can leverage on that and make it to be actionable. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry.
You might have the last word, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
I also want to suggest that at JET we have a knowledge management department that is specializing with documenting any events that are happening, any successes that are happening. Then we can learn from that and share it on different platforms for everyone to learn from and take it from there, whether it's networking, collaboration that can be brought about. So it's also good to do something, but also to document it for the future actions. How do we learn from that? How do we improve or update the information that we have going forward?
Oh, great.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for the offer. Okay, so I want to bring this to a close, unless you have a last burning comment or a question. I think there's snacks left, so when we're done here formally, we can continue informally. Some people have to run and others can stay another minute. You want to?
I just wanted to request from everyone if we could just get a group photo before everybody rushes out.
Oh.
Please. Thank you.
Okay. Then he's going to put on his flash for the group photo. So I'm going to recommend to Umlambo Foundation and the patron, but also Letsima, the two of you actually, to take these messages through. And it's only two. The first one is, I think that we are looking at an emerging forum. We are building on something that has value. And this forum must be defined by an agenda for action. I hear you say, let's not be academic about this, let's be more practical about this. And I do see that Letsima and Umlambo Foundation can be our convening hosts, so to speak. We maintain this kind of membership, but also we should consider creatively about how to bring other voices to the same table or the same space, because in future it might not be a table, but we might go to Vembe or Soweto or some other place outside of the concrete structures, and also bring in those in the private sector or the financial sector who are interested in reinvesting. I got that message loud and clear. We have to think of our methodology, the way that we shape our agenda and pursue it. And towards the end of this conversation, many creative ideas came up. I'll mention that again in a minute. We also had a discussion informally about how do you ask a learner or a child who's exposed to the system to voice her concerns or her impressions or her desires or her disappointments. To put 2 or 3 of them here will be overwhelming and maybe not too ethical. That's not the right thing to do.
You have to have permission.
Not the right thing to do. There are creative ways of, I spoke to some of you, we interview them informally in preparation for another round of the forum, and in their comfort at home with their parents, with a teacher, and so on and so on. And you interview the principal at the same time, and you can package a thing and use social media very powerfully. It doesn't have to cost money, etc., etc. And so there are ways of bringing other voices to the forum. And then that's the first one. The second one I would recommend to Dr. Phumzile is, in terms of content, there's a couple of things that we want to prioritize. We can't discuss anything and everything. And in fact, that's the first point that some of you made very quietly is we have to have a crisp understanding of the nature of the problem we face. It is not as if everything is in crisis, and it's also not that everything works. What is it that we understand is the nature of the problem? We have to be clear about that. So there's a bit of work there, and also I pick up from many of you that we have to have a systemic approach to this instead of this ad hoc interventions. Solve problems quickly here and there, only to find a year later that they've come back and they've multiplied or they've become worse. And that will then help us to understand, are we talking of an overhaul, an adjustment, an improvement, and innovation? So those are the teasing questions, the questions that we are hungry to deal with in this forum that we might create now. And I've also picked up, it's not as if we are technicians or hardware engineers. We must be people-oriented. We must be child-oriented. Somebody said why can't we create a more caring system? You said children feel they don't, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. Why don't we have a caring system? The African child is left behind. How can this be? So there's emotion involved as well, and it's a normative project that we want to undertake. So that's the first one. It's a big one, and we've got so many smart people in this forum and elsewhere in the country that couldn't come to this moment that we will ask to help reflect. Prioritize teacher training, prioritize the 3 R's, is it? Controversially, for some of us, I'm also a political scientist like you, engage the decision makers on the political economy of the system. We must talk to the politicians. We must engage them. Maybe not confront. Bring them into a dialogue. It's the politicians, it's the decision makers, it's the ruling party or the coming alliance, if you want, or coalition. It's the trade union. We have to talk to those who have power and exercise power. And then a very intriguing formulation is, how do we prepare young people to be ready for the world of work? Right? That's the point that came from you. And I think that's where one of our emphasis ought to be. And then the point of how do we tap into philanthropic opportunities and other partners and encourage sponsorships and learnerships, and not short-term ad hoc, but meaningful and integrated.
Absolutely.
So bring partners to the table as well. I'm very excited about that because we really suffer, even Umlambo. We're not professional fundraisers, you know. We work on the passion and the knowledge that we have. So we need that structure, and that will help us. And then finally, the last point is dissemination. So you started off by saying, let's each one write something for our own little network, and then the message goes out. I like that. We can structure that even and work with social media. Umlambo has a website that is being sort of made more sophisticated. That could be a vehicle. There's assistance from JET possibly. And then I think we need to reach a broad audience, stakeholders, so-called, so that the knowledge and the learning that happens here gets out and not confined into this room. And in that way, make the forum attractive and accessible and interesting. Not everybody has to come to the annual or the quarterly or whatever meetings, but if we have a continuous, modern way of engaging those who need our assistance and those who want to assist, then I think it's a winning formula. And those are the messages that I will transmit to Umlambo and to the patron. And hopefully that constitutes a form of an action agenda. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.